Suppose you were put in jail. Would God be able to turn bad upside down?
You're watching Timeless Talks, timeless subjects, information for life. Bad things happen to everyone, including you and I. I mean, people may talk bad about you and wreck your reputation. Or maybe you lose your job unexpectedly. Or worse, maybe you lose your husband and your wife and suddenly it's you and the kids. But what if you were put in jail? Because in jail, that's where the worst of people are. I mean, if it's evil, you can find it in a prison. And if you cross the wrong person in a prison, it's very possible that they'll find you lying in the cell with maybe a shank stuck in your chest, and they'll carry you out in a body bag. No one wants to go to jail. None of us see jail as something that could be useful for God. But you know, Paul had found something else to be true. He found himself to be a prisoner of the Roman Empire. And this is what he wrote about his situation. I'm reading from Philippians chapter 1, beginning in verse 12. I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. And most of the brothers, having become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. You know, when Paul was in prison, he wound up infecting all the people that he touched. Just because he was in prison, he didn't take on this, oh, woe is me, everybody should pity me kind of thing. No. He turned it into something useful for God. Listen to what he said here. First, he tells us that what has happened to him has served to advance the gospel. You know, 4 tremendous books of the New Testament were written while Paul was in prison. Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians that we're reading from, and Colossians. Second, we see that the whole thing had become known to the imperial guard. You see, Paul infected the guards who were taking care of him, and even to the point of getting the imperial guard. Those were the guards who took care of the Caesars, the emperor of the world. And he had taught them, and they had become Christians inside that special serving group. The third thing that Paul says came along here is that, and most of the brothers, having become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word of the gospel. Listen, Paul found that because he was in prison, other people who were on the outside looked and saw that Paul didn't die because he was imprisoned immediately. As a matter of fact, Paul had turned it into something that was good for other people. And if that was the case, well then why shouldn't I preach and teach more boldly than ever before? And plus the fact that since Paul was the main instigator of so many problems, he was in prison, it opened the doors for everybody else who weren't such a threat. And they began speaking boldly the plain truth of the gospel. From what we've read, Paul saw even his own imprisonment not as something bad or catastrophic, but as a tool of God to advance that gospel into places it might not have gone at other times. God is capable of taking the bad things that happen to people and turn them into something good. I remind you from the Old Testament of the 3 Hebrew boys who would not give up their God and worship and fall down and worshiped Nebuchadnezzar's great idol, they got thrown into a fiery furnace 7 times harder than ever done. And yet God protected them and allowed them to walk out of there without even any hint of smoke or any even singed hair. I also want to remind you of Daniel, because Daniel was one who, because he kept on praying to God even when he was told not to, he was thrown into a lion's den. And yet the next day, he came out of there without so much as a scratch. God took care of him. And I want to remind you of Lazarus in the New Testament. Lazarus, after being dead 4 days, and even his sister says he must be stinking, he came out of that grave at the command of Jesus and became a walking testimony about Jesus' power and what God can do. So what does this mean for you? Well, understand this, please, that just because you may have lost your mate or your reputation or other bad things may have happened to you, does that mean I'm going to get everything restored back like it was? And the answer is no, or at least not necessarily. Very unlikely. But what it can mean is that what has happened to you can be used by God to further His purposes. Maybe not yours, but His. For that advancement, it is going to require that you have a personal relationship with Him. Not something that you opened up and found in the back of a Bible in a hotel and prayed this sinner's prayer. No. We're talking about something much more than that. In John chapter 14 and in John chapter 15, it mentions how that we must be people who are always obeying whatever He says, whatever that may be. That's the beginning point of a relationship with God, that God can then take what happens with you and turn it into something good for Him. So it's about what advances His purposes. But understand this as well. That doesn't mean that you cannot have great comfort in knowing that what you're doing is something God would approve of. That you can endure better. That you may have more patience in situations or with other people. And it should give you great consolation that God can give you a purpose for living and for working and for trying to be His servant and obeying Him. He can use what you've got for something grand, just like in the case of Paul. At TimelessTalks.net, we are interested in helping you achieve the great goals that God can use with you. Please go to our website. There, use the contact page where that you can contact us and let us know what is going on with yourself. Or, if you wish, and live in the United States, you can use this telephone number that's here and call us. Now, I'm not going to answer your phone most likely, but leave a message. Tell us your name and what your problem is very briefly and how you want us to contact you. You give us that information and we'd be pleased to be able to try to serve you in those ways. Look, we're here in this for you, and we hope that you are going to have a great day. And we appreciate you watching us. So we wish you that the Lord may take a great liking to you today. So until next time, goodbye for now.